Good evening, everyone. Myself, Dr. Neha Singh. On behalf of IIT Raigarh, I welcome you all to yet another interactive academic session. I extend my warm welcome to all my seniors, colleagues, and all the attendees for today's clinical meet on Zoom as well as YouTube Live. For opening remarks, I would like to welcome our President, Dr. Sunita Ingle, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Neha. And really happy to see you all again. And because on popular demand, because we had a very interesting discussion on diabetic ketoacidosis in the last academic activity, which was of journal journey. And we wanted to know more, like Dil Mange more on diabetes. So we have invited Dr. Nikhil Shah for a very interesting session. And Dr. Wankhede is on. Sir also very interested in diabetes. So he was also insistent that have this session. And we would definitely like to hear more about it from Mr. And I welcome all my seniors, Dr. Dabadkar sir, Dr. Bhandarkar sir, Ganga sir, and Dr. Chandorkar. Vaibhav is also here, Abba sir. So I welcome you all for this academic learning. Over to Dr. Neha for introduction of our speaker.
The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
Neha, unmute yourself.
For today's discussion, we have an interesting topic of pediatric endocrinology, DK. And for this, we have Dr. Nikhil Shah sir as speaker. He is a famous pediatric endocrinologist. He did his graduation from Nayar Hospital, Mumbai, DNB Pediatrics from Kachi Kamakoti Child Trust Hospital, Chennai, Fellowship in Pediatric Endocrinology from Jahangir Hospital, Pune. At present, Dr. Nikhil sir is working as consultant pediatric endocrinologist and child and development growth specialist in Bhatia Hospital, Cloud9 Hospital Malad, Neo Plus Hospital Borivali, Royal Children Hospital Kalyan. He is also honorable visiting consultant pediatric endocrinologist at LTMC College and Science Hospital. Nikhil sir, welcome and over to you.
Yeah. I'll just share my screen first. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
It's gone into, okay. So as Madam said, I think last time it was a journal club session and we couldn't discuss the case much because I was focusing more on methodology and there were some errors in that paper on the methodology. So before we plan any study, I think the methodology has to be very precise. So that's the reason I thought I'll just discuss DK. So I'll be talking about the latest guidelines, just a practical approach on how to manage diabetic ketoacidosis. So I'll just 1 minute. So why is this topic important? Because incidence of type 1 diabetes in children has increased over the last 20 years. I think practically every school now has a child with type 1 diabetes. And by 2025, India will have the maximum number of children with type 1 diabetes incidence as well as prevalence. So it is important from this point of view. Secondly, the most common presentation of type 1 diabetes, that is the first presentation of type 1 diabetes, is DK. They will just walk into the OPD in a sick state. So as this is the most common presentation, we should know its basic management. This is the easiest pediatric emergency to manage. You ask any PICU specialist, they will say it is really easy once you understand the management, and the prognosis is very good. One thing we need to understand is a child with DK will die only if our management is faulty or if they come very late. So invariably, if a child is coming walking into the PICU, then it is our management which will harm the child. So it is very important we realize the proper management, as improper management can lead to complications and mortality. So what is the overview of today's topic? I'll be just talking how do we pick up DK or a child with diabetes clinically. So what are the basic signs and symptoms? What is the definition and severity of DK? Management in terms of fluid therapy and insulin therapy, which are the two most important cornerstones of DK management. Potassium bicarbonate therapy. Monitoring in DK, how frequently should we monitor? What should we monitor? when should we, manage in resource limited settings? What are the complications? So basically, I'll be talking of cerebral edema. How do we gradually shift a child from intravenous insulin therapy to subcutaneous insulin therapy? And finally, the take-home messages. So coming to clinical pickup of DK cases. So the thing is, no child is going to come, sir, mere sugar high hai, so mere ko DK hai. This only happens if it is already a known case of DK. But unless otherwise, if it's a new case of diabetes, we are not going to know the sugar readings. The most common symptom will be excessive thirst, or they're drinking or they're passing too much of urine. So specifically, if they're talking of secondary nocturnal enuresis, means child was able to maintain, dry at night, but now is suddenly passing urine in the night. So bedwetting is complained there in the night. Or if child is getting a multiple times to pass urine in the night, then this is one of the early signs of a child having diabetes, and maybe we can pick up before the child develops DK. Sudden loss of weight, or if there is a loss of weight over the last 2 to 3 months, then again this should point towards diabetes. Now, what are the actual signs of DK? They are as complaints of stomach pain or nausea. So there will be severe abdominal pain. This is because of acidosis leading to mesenteric ischemia, which causes a lot of stomach pain and leads to vomiting. Then you will have, because of the dehydration, because of the fluid loss, you will have signs of dehydration such as dry mouth, tongue, sore throat, dark circles under the eyes. Once the acidosis starts developing, you will have deep, heavy breathing, that is Kussmaul's breathing. You sometimes might get fruity smelling breath. And finally, if we yet do not pick it up, this leads to drowsiness, which can ultimately lead to death. So, so when should we actually pick up? So if any child is having any of these complaints, that is excessive thirst, urinating too much, or if there is loss of weight, I think our antenna needs to go up. These are the early signs when we can pick up DK, and all these are late signs. Unfortunately, majority of the patients come to us when there are late signs and they're already into severe DK. Now, a very common problem that happens is, along with the symptoms, we start thinking of other conditions, because in our postgraduate, also in the curriculum of pediatrics, we are not taught too much of endocrinology. So we start thinking the common things first. So because the child is passing too much urine, I have seen that they've been receiving treatment for UTI for a very long time. I've seen a couple of children even receiving treatment for nocturnal enuresis. So someone has started desmopressin in the night, but actually if they just check the sugar, it is nothing but diabetes. Sudden loss of weight, or there is loss of weight over the last 2 to 3 months, unless proved otherwise. In India, we think of TB. So I do agree that TB is an important cause, but if there is no fever, there is no cough, no respiratory symptom, no contact, I think we need to start thinking in terms of diabetes. Any pain in abdomen, we start thinking surgical, like appendicitis. So every pain in abdomen need not be surgical. Always just get a sugar check. Vomiting, we start thinking of any GI infection, hepatitis, and no one checks the sugars. And I think this is the most common DD. Majority of the places, what happens is any deep, heavy breathing, first thing that comes us to mind is respiratory tract infection. So I remember when we were doing residency, my colleague was called to the OR. This was when we were in first year of residency. A child came with very fast breathing, that is tachypnea. And first thing we thought is, just give nebulization, and the child is not improving. And when we check the sugars, we realize that the child had DK. So I think this is a common mistake that we tend to do, is we tend to feel that it is respiratory. So any silent tachypnea is there without other respiratory symptoms, please get a sugar check. And finally, any drowsiness leading to unconsciousness, or if seizures do happen because of cerebral edema, we think of CNS infection. So at such time also, I think it is important to check glucose. So these are all the conditions that could be confused with your DK presentation. Now, which are the guidelines we follow? So problem is, every 2 years the guidelines get updated. So when I was in Gujarat, we used to follow the BSPD 2014 guidelines. When I was in Chennai, we used to follow the ISPAT 2014 guidelines. When I was in Pune, we used to follow the ISPAT 2018 guidelines. So I think the easiest guideline right now to follow is the BSPD 2020 guideline, which is very easy to understand and easy to follow. So this is the British Society for Pediatric Endocrinology guidelines. Now coming to the definition or biochemical criteria of DK. So as you know, DK is nothing but hyperglycemia plus ketosis plus acidosis. All three have to be there. Even if one is not there, then it is not DK. So this is nothing but hyperglycemia, ketosis, and acidosis. Now, how do we define hyperglycemia? any sugar which is more than 200 is defined as hyperglycemia. A pH which is less than 7.3 and or a bicarb of less than 15. So if you don't have the facility to get a pH done, then even bicarb is okay. So if bicarb is less than 15, we consider it as acidosis. You do not need an arterial pH. Venous pH is more than enough because we're just looking at pH. We're not looking at the oxygenation part. So a simple VBG is enough. So when you're taking the other samples, just send for venous blood gas. You will get the pH. So any pH less than 7.3 and or bicarb less than 15 is acidosis. And any ketonuria, ketonemia is difficult in our country because every lab doesn't give us those results. So I think ketonuria is easy. It's a bedside test. Ketones, if they are greater than or equal to 2+, that is large, moderate to large ketones, is considered as ketonuria. If the lab backup is there and you have a good lab, then beta hydroxybutyrate is the ketone, blood ketone to send. Anything more than 3 is significant. So coming back to the definition, sugar greater than 200, pH less than 7.3 and or bicarb less than 15, and ketonuria, that is ketones greater than equal to 2+, is labeled as DK. Now, what is the severity of DK? So this is the change in the current guidelines. So 2014
Nikhil,
guidelines.
sir.
Yes.
Nikhil, sir, may I have one question, please?
Yes, yes.
This ketonuria is when there's a 2+, is
Yes.
it correlated with urine sugar, urine glucose?
No. So normally what will happen is even if a child is having diabetes, the sugar will be 3+. So there is no correlation between your urine sugar and urine ketones.
Okay, but
So-
generally urine ketones positive, and if the patient has got diabetic ketoacidosis, then this means urine sugar will be definitely
Any
positive.
child who has ketones positive along with acidosis, then I will say DK. So even in sick diabetic children, you can have ketones positive. So that management is different. So for that, we don't need to give intravenous insulin therapy. We just need to give subcut insulin therapy more frequently.
Okay, sir.
So that
Okay,
is
my question is related to definition, so I'm just interrupting. Sorry for that.
Yes.
Like we are in peripheral area where
Correct.
blood gases are hardly
Not
done.
available.
It's very difficult.
Yes.
And the definition pH is mentioned. I mean, bicarbonate pH is very important.
Yes.
So without having blood gases, can we define our patients as DK provide only with sugar and urine ketones and urine sugar?
So if normally what will happen is the sugar, if it is around say more than 350, 400, this is again, this is just by experience I'm saying.
Okay.
So technically they say greater than 200, but if it is actually DK, your sugar will be at least 350, 400. If you're having a sugar of 350, 400, and if ketones is more than or equal to 2+, then it is better to treat as DK if you do not have the pH facilities.
Okay.
So
Yes.
Suppose if you're having sugar of just 210 and ketones are just 2+, then it is better to sit, wait and observe. Just give subcut therapy. If you're giving normally before meals, I would advise them to give 4 early. I would not, directly jump to DK.
Okay.
So more higher sugar in the peripheries, I would say around say 350, 400. And if ketones are say 2+, 3+, normally in DK your ketones will be 3+ or 4+. 2+ also will not be there. So much higher ketones, a much higher sugar. If pH facilities are not available, bicarb facilities are not available, then it is better to treat as DK.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
But sir, clinical presentation will also will be there, na?
Clinical
If we are thinking of
presentation.
acidosis,
Yes.
patient-
I do
patient
agree.
will have the
Mild,
coma,
moderate, and
mild,
severe.
because
Correct.
everything will be there.
No, that I do agree. But even a poorly controlled type 1 diabetes is going to have those symptoms. So sometimes mild DK, you might not be able to pick up acidotic breathing. You might not be able to pick up other things. So problem happens when it is mild DK and normal check. Severe DK, you will have all the signs of acidotic breathing. You will have, significant polyuria. You will have significant weight loss. But when it is mild DK, you might not have acidotic breathing. You might not have depressed sensorium. So that is where the problem lies. So a lot of my mild DKs will just walk into the OPD, we do a VBG and we realize the child is in DK.
Sir, what would be more reliable, anion gap or ketone bodies?
Ketone bodies. Anion gap we don't see for DK. So for DK, you need
Because
ketones
for
to be positive.
hyperosmolarity, we need to take consideration the sodium into consideration.
So sodium I'll be talking about later, that is more for cerebral edema management. So for definition of DK, it is only these three criteria, that is hyperglycemia, pH or bicarb or ketones. Sodium I will be talking of, but later on that is more for cerebral edema management, not for the definition of DK.
Okay.
So anion gap, I do agree it is important, but it is not so really required for the diagnosis. For diagnosis, these three things are important. Anion gap might just tell you if concomitant sepsis and all is there, then yes, anion gap will help you in those conditions. Otherwise, anion gap is not going to add much to the information.
Right.
So coming to the severity of DK now. So as I was telling, that 2014 guidelines just classified it as mild and severe DK. So the current guidelines have changed this. We've got as mild, moderate and severe, and this is again based on your pH. So in the periphery, this is going to be an issue because we do not have pH facilities, but I will be telling about all of those things. So if it is mild DK, so any pH less than 7.3 and between 7.2 we consider as mild, and or bicarb between 10 to 15. Moderate is between 7.1 and 7.2, and bicarb should be 5 to 10. Severe is if the bicarb is less than 7.1 and pH is less than 7.1 and bicarb is less than 5. So places where these facilities are available, pH and bicarb, which majority of the places it will be, then this is easy to classify. Then the management becomes very easy. The places where it is not easily available, then what I will advise is you consider as mild the children who are walking into the OPD, and where there is severe acidotic breathing, then consider it as severe.
Right.
Why this is important? Because all our fluid calculations will be based on mild, moderate and severe. So I'll be just coming to that. Now, emergency management. So we have defined what is DK. We have classified it as mild, moderate or severe. Now coming to the management, as anyone will tell you, never forget your ABCs. So airway is important, but always keep a very high threshold for intubation. Scared by seeing that acidotic breathing, because the acidotic breathing will subside after 6 to 8 hours of management. So however severe the acidotic breathing, but if the sensorium is well maintained, then please do not intubate. Keep a very, very high threshold for intubation in DK. Breathing, so as in any child with shock, you will give oxygen by face mask. Circulation, always take 2 IVs, one because you're going to be giving IV fluids, the other we are going to be giving insulin. So at the same time, please take off the 2 IVs. That will just save you time. While taking the IVs, please send investigations, which I'll be discussing later. We'll be giving bolus, that again I'll be discussing later. In the main center setups where there are good PICUs and all, there is a lot of this habit of taking central lines. So please do not take central lines in a case of DK because there is a risk of thrombosis. So in DK children, we do not take central lines, we just manage by IVs. Neurological assessment is very, very important in the emergency part because you don't want to miss an early onset cerebral edema. Again, I'll be discussing this later on. And I think the most important part of the management is weighing the child. So if majority of the DK children, you will be able to weigh the children. It is only in those cases who come very late, who have developed cerebral edema, you might not be able to weigh. So any child of DK, please weigh the child because entire management is going to depend on the weight of the child and the severity of DK. So what are the initial investigations you will send? So as to diagnose DK, as I just discussed, you'll be sending a glucose, a plasma glucose, you'll be sending your venous blood gas, and you'll be sending ketones. Places where beta hydroxybutyrate facilities are available, please do send a beta hydroxybutyrate. What are the other things we'll be sending? So we'll be sending a sodium. Sodium is very important in your cerebral edema management. I'll be coming to that. Potassium, because a lot of these children, so all these children are going to be on insulin therapy, so you need to know what your potassium is like. Bicarbonate is again for your severity classification. RFT, because a lot of these children could be in prerenal failure because of the dehydration. CBCs, HbA1c, just to know since when this has been going on. And please send cultures only if fever is present. Do not be in a hurry to send TSH at diagnosis, because if you send TSH that time and if something comes abnormal, how do you interpret it? It could just be something like a sick euthyroid syndrome. So please send TSH once the acidosis is settled and you're going to discharge the patient. For diagnosis point of view, C-peptide, again, do not need to send initially. You can send it later on. So that will basically tell us roughly, are we looking at type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes? So DK is the most common presentation of type 1 diabetes, but 25% of children with type 2 diabetes can also present with DK. So we need to be careful of that. And in cases where there is doubt, so if you're not sure whether this is type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes, like an adolescent child, an obese child, such conditions, you might send off the antibodies. So in India, we do 4 antibodies, that is the GAD65, islet cell antibody, insulin antibody, and the insulin-associated antigen, insulinoma-associated antigen antibody. And abroad, they do one more, that is a zinc transporter 8 antibody. So these are the investigations. The one in bold, I think, are a must. So glucose, VVG, urine ketones, your electrolytes, RFT, CBC, and HbA1c. Now coming to fluid therapy, I think the next 2-3 slides are the most important part of the management. So yeah, so any DK which is mild, moderate, or severe DK. So any type of DK who are not shocked, that means the peripheral perfusion is good, your pulses are well felt, there is no prolonged delay of capillary refill time, and who will require IV fluids, just give 10 ml per kg of normal saline over 60 minutes. So I'll again repeat, any child with DK who is not shocked and who is going to require IV fluids for management, just give 10 ml per kg of normal saline over 60 minutes. And we will be subtracting this from our fluid calculation management, which I will be coming to later on. The thing we need to remember is any child with DK who is not shocked, just given 10 ml per kg of normal saline bolus over 60 minutes. Any shocked patients or any child with severe DK with shock, so shock, as you all know, will be any wide pulse pressure or your poor capillary refill time, or there is a decrease in the blood pressure. So there you will give a 20 ml per kg of normal saline. You treat it like shock. You will give it over 15 minutes and you can go up to 40 ml per kg. So any shocked child, you will give 20 ml per kg of bolus over 15 minutes. You can go up to 40 ml per kg, and this you will not subtract. So in non-shocked patients, you're going to be subtracting your bolus. In shocked patients, you're not going to be subtracting your bolus. We should remember that any excessive fluid should be avoided because of cerebral edema. So what happens is normally a DK child comes, a lot of fluid is given initially, and this should be avoided because if the child is not in shock, you will be pushing him towards cerebral edema. So the main thing is to assess the child. If the child is not shocked, please give just 10 ml per kg of bolus. Because if you are giving more bolus, you are going to be pushing the child to developing cerebral edema. And the child should be kept strict NBM. No orally, the child should not be allowed orally for at least 24 to 36 hours till acidosis does not resolve. Now, what are the fluid therapy calculations? So what is the requirement? Requirement of the child is nothing but deficit plus maintenance over 48 hours. So I'll be just clarifying this. So requirement is nothing but deficit plus maintenance over 48 hours. So we'll be first talking of deficit. So depending on the severity of the DK, you will take mild DK as 5% deficit. You'll be taking moderate DK as 7% deficit, and severe DK will be taking 10% deficit. Now in resource limited settings where your pH and bicarb is not available, if a child walks into the OPD, take it as mild, take it just as 5% deficit. And if the child is looking sick, there is severe acidotic breathing, then please take it as 10% deficit. Otherwise, if pH or bicarb facilities are available and you're able to classify your DK, so mild DK take as 5% deficit, moderate DK take as 7% deficit, severe DK take as 10% deficit. Now, what is this deficit? I will be again coming to. Now, what is maintenance fluid? So like our normal maintenance fluid calculation, we follow the Holiday Cigar formula. For the first 10 kilos of weight, we take 100 ml per kg per day. For the 10 to 20 kilos, we take 50 ml per kg per day. And after 20 kilos, we take 20 ml per kg per day. Now, quite a common question that we come across is, what if the child is like, 85 kilos and 86 kilos. So these days we are seeing a lot of obesity. So then should we be giving so much fluid? Because then the calculation will go into around 300 and 400 ml per kg hour. So in this case, the guidelines have currently given a criteria. Maximum weight of 80 kilos or 97 centile weight for according to whichever is lower, we take that as. So 80 kilos. If the child is say 85 kilos, you will take 80 kilos calculation, or you will take 97 percentile for the age. So if a 10-year-old child who is 85 kilos, then you will not be even taking 80 kilos, you will be taking the 97 percentile weight for age. So that is the lower thing. So you take the lower. So either you take 80 kilos or 97 percentile weight for age, whichever is lower. So now I'll be just giving examples because I've given a lot of calculations. So how do we calculate fluids? So basically fluids are calculated as hourly rate. So whatever deficit we are giving, so deficit, as I said, depending on mild, we give 5% deficit, moderate, we give 7%, severe, we give 10%. We are going to subtract the bolus from the deficit. So all non-shock patients, as I said, we have to subtract the bolus. Shocked patients, we do not subtract the bolus. So this calculation we are going to be dividing by 48 hours, and then we are going to add the maintenance per hour. So I will just give you an example. So I think things will become very much clear. This is again being given in the guidelines. So let's assume the child's weight is 20 kilos, pH is 7.15, and the child has received 10 ml per kg bolus. So what you can realize is 7.15 pH is there. So this is moderate decay. The child is not shocked. That's why we've just given 10 ml per kg of bolus. So that is the first inference, that this is moderate decay because the pH is 7.15. Any child who's having pH between 7.1 to 7.2 is moderate decay. And because the child is not shocked, we've just given 10 ml per kg bolus. Now, how do we calculate? So because we've taken it as moderate decay, we take a deficit of 7%. So 7% into 20 kilos, that is 70 into 20 is 1400 ml. So 1400 ml is your deficit for this child. But because we've given a 10 ml per kg bolus, so 20 into 10 is 200. So what we are going to do is 1400 ml minus 200 is equal to 1200 ml. As you can see the formula here, this 1200 you have to give over 48 hours. So 1200 divided by 48 gives you your deficit rate. So that is your 25 ml per hour. So I'll just repeat again, the child is having moderate decay. So we've taken 7% deficit. This we multiply by 20 kilos, that comes to around 1400 ml. Because the child received 10 ml per kg bolus, we are subtracting that bolus. That comes to 1200 ml. This 1200 ml you have to replace by 48 hours. So 1200 divided by 48 comes to 25 ml per hour. Now maintenance fluids we take according to our holiday cigar. So for the first 10 kilos, we are going to take 100 ml per kg. So that is 1000 ml. For the next 10 kilos, we are going to take 50 ml per kg. That is 500 ml. So child's maintenance is 1500 ml over 24 hours. So that is 62 ml per hour. Now hourly rate is nothing but deficit rate plus maintenance rate. So we are adding 25 plus 62. This child will require 87 ml per hour fluids for the next 48 hours. I'll give one more example, so I think it will be clear. So again, the formula is the same. Hourly rate is nothing but deficit minus initial bolus divided by 48 hours plus maintenance per hour. Now you have a 60 kilo child with pH of 6.9 and he's shocked. That's why he received a 30 ml per kg bolus. So if you are having 6.9 pH, that means this is severe decay. So the calculation for severe decay is 10% deficit. So 10 into 60, so 100 into 60 is 6000. So deficit of 10% into 60 kg is 6000. We are not going to be subtracting the bolus here because the child is shocked. So the entire 6000 here, 6000 divided by 48 is 125 ml per hour. Now maintenance for a 60 kilo child, for the first 10 kilos we take as 1000 ml. For the next 10 kilos we take as 500 ml. And for the remaining kilos we take 20 ml per kg. So that is 14 to 20, that is 800 ml. So the total maintenance is 2300 over 24 hours. That comes to 96 ml per hour. So this child's requirement is going to be deficit plus maintenance. This is 125 ml per hour plus 96 ml per hour, which comes to 221 ml per hour. So this is how we calculate fluid therapy. You first calculate the deficit. So first you should know whether the child is shocked or not shocked. If the child is shocked, if the child is not shocked, you're going to give 10 ml per kg bolus, which you're going to subtract. If the child is not shocked, you will give 20 ml per kg bolus. You can go up to 40 ml per kg. You're not going to subtract that. Then you have to calculate deficit based on the severity of decay. And then you calculate the maintenance. So your rate of fluids is nothing but deficit minus bolus plus maintenance. This is how we calculate fluids for decay. So now coming to potassium therapy. So now I think everything is much easy. The fluid part can get a little bit confusing. So we add potassium only to the maintenance fluids. We do not add it to the bolus. Again, I want to clarify, we add it to the maintenance as well as the deficit fluid. We do not add it to the bolus fluids. So we add potassium only once a child has passed urine to confirm that they are not becoming anuric and potassium has fallen to within the upper limit of normal range. So if the potassium is less than 5.5, we can add potassium. So this usually happens after the initial 10 ml per kg of bolus. So what we normally do is we add 40 milliequivalents of potassium to every pint, that is every 500 ml of liquid. So that is 10 ml of KCl. So every 500 ml of liquid, we add 10 cc of KCl. That comes to roughly 40 milliequivalent per liter, or that is 40 milliequivalent per liter. Now coming to insulin therapy. So basically we use is the regular insulin or the atrapid insulin. We start the insulin only 1 to 2 hours after beginning the intravenous fluid therapy. We do not give insulin boluses, which was given according to the Milwaukee protocol. There is no insulin bolus which is given these days. We are starting the insulin after giving IV fluids for 1 to 2 hours. So suppose if the child comes at 2:30, you start the IV fluids at 3 o'clock. You will start the insulin only at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. You're not going to start insulin before that. So how do we make the insulin preparation? So we add 50 units of the soluble regular insulin to 49.5 ml of 0.9% of sodium chloride. And we then started depending on the severity of decay. So the current guidelines say, that is the ISPAT 2018 basically says you start mild and moderate decay. And if children is less than 5 years, irrespective of decay, you start at 0.05 unit per kg per hour. If it is severe decay, you start at, this is not 1, this is 0.1 unit per kg per hour. This is 0.1 unit per kg per hour. This is an error. So if it is mild or moderate decay, we start at 0.05 unit per kg per hour. If it is severe decay, we start at 0.1 unit per kg per hour. So if the child is weighing say 10 kilos and is having mild or moderate decay, we started at 0.5 ml per kg per hour. If the child is weighing 10 kilos and the child is having severe decay, we started at 1 ml per kg per hour. Again, the latest guidelines say that if the child is already on a long-acting insulin, something like Glargine or Digludec, then this should be continued. So original guidelines never talked about giving a long-acting insulin. The new guidelines say that if the patient is already on a long-acting insulin, please continue that insulin. And in a newly diagnosed child, you might think of giving a subcutaneous long-acting insulin. Now, this is where the problem happens. We have done the fluid calculation. We've started the insulin. Now, how do we, manage the fluid rates and all of that? So fluid rate is not an issue because you will be containing the fluid rate, but how do you calculate the drip percentages and all of this? So what the guidelines characteristically say that if your sugar is more than 250, you will be just giving plain 0.9 NS. If your sugar starts going below 250, you add glucose, so that becomes your 0.9 DNS. After that, the guidelines are very vague. So what I follow in practice, this is my opinion. If the sugar starts going below 180, we make it a 7.5% drip. If the sugar goes below 100, we make it a 10% drip. So different units follow different things. This is what I follow. The guidelines just talk about these first two lines. If your BSL is greater than 250, you give 0.9 NS. If your BSL is less than 250, we add glucose, so 0.9 DNS. So what I do is, and make the job easier, we just form a protocol. If your BSL starts going below 180, we shift to a 7.5% drip. 7.5% drip, this is how we calculate, that is the formula 5x minus 25. So 13 ml of 25% dextrose and 87 ml of 0.9% DNS. And if BSL starts going below 100, we shift to a 10% drip. This is again, I'm just reiterating, these are my points, no guideline says this. And then the guidelines say that if the BSL continues to stay low, that is below 100, then you might start thinking of tapering the insulin. In some conditions, the IV insulin is not possible. So you can give subcut insulin in certain conditions, but only if it is an uncomplicated decay, that is mild, moderate. As far as possible, avoid in severe decay or if the sensorium is depressed. So in such conditions, what we do is we give hourly to 2 hourly subcutaneous rapid-acting insulin analog, that is either a Lispro, Glulicin or Aspart. So what we do is we give the initial dose at around 0.3 unit per kg, followed 1 hour by 0.1 unit per kg. If we are giving 2 hourly, we make it 0.15 to 0.2 unit per kg. So if you are giving subcut insulin in decay, as far as possible, just give it in mild, moderate. Better to give IV only. But if it is not possible for some reason, then what we do is we give a 0.3 unit per kg of insulin stat. After 1 hour, we make it 0.1 unit per kg. If we are giving too early, it's either 0.15 to 0.2 unit per kg. If the sugar starts going below 250, we shift to 0.05 unit per kg per hour if the decay resolves. Suppose in some conditions where even the rapid acting insulin is not available, you are just having regular insulin, that is your yellow color or the atrapid insulin, then you can give 4 hourly. Again, this is advisable only in mild to moderate decays, not in severe decays. So starting dose, so what we do is we calculate, depending on the body weight, we take it as 0.8 to 1 unit per kg. So suppose the child's weight is 20 kilos, we take it as 1 unit per kg. So that becomes 20 units. So this 20 units we are going to be dividing into 4 over 6 doses. So roughly we'll be giving around 4 units per hour. So 20 units, if it's a 20 kilo child, we divide it over 6 doses, that roughly comes around 3 to 4 units per every 4 hours. So bicarbonate therapy, this is a very, very important thing. It is not to be given in DK at all. Whatever the bicarb, even if it is, yes.
Sir, just a minute. If we are giving subcutaneous insulin,
Yes.
and the child is conscious,
Yes.
can we give? Should we give intravenous fluid? Intravenous
Yes,
NS,
yes,
or
yes, yes,
we can
yes.
give
Because the
oral
dehydration is yet
fluid?
there. Because the dehydration is yet there, so you have to give intravenous fluid.
If the child is conscious,
Yes, but yet the intravascular fluid is
able
going
to
to
take
be.
orally, able to take orally.
So again, if you are suspecting DKA, then it is better to keep the child NBM for a few hours, give IV fluids and give subcut insulin. If the facilities are not there to check your pH,
Yes.
there will be some dehydration. That is the reason the child has come to you.
Okay.
So I would, in such cases, then give IV fluids for some time, give subcut insulin, see how the child is. The child is become better, then maybe after 12 to 24 hours, take a call and then shift to, then allow them orally. Because otherwise, all the calculations go for a toss.
Sir, in subcutaneous insulin, should we again observe for this ketone body injury?
For what?
For ketonuria.
So ketonuria is the last thing to get corrected. So ketones, urine ketones are a very, very poor marker of, telling you that the acidosis is resolved. So ketones might be even positive 2 days after the acidosis is resolved. So unfortunately, ketones is a very unreliable marker to tell you that the acidosis is resolved.
Right.
So in such condition, then I think going clinically will be better where pH and bicarb is not available. Where pH bicarb is available, you can do that and then the child is not in acidosis. But urine ketones can be positive even 2 days after ketosis, after your acidosis resolves. So I would not go by urine ketones.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So coming to bicarbonate therapy, we do not give bicarbonate at all. It is not to be given in DK. This is the hard and fast rule ki however low your pH, however low your bicarb, even if your bicarb is at 2, please do not give bicarb. The bicarb only indications are if there is life-threatening hyperkalemia or if there is severe acidosis with impaired myocardial contractility, then only bicarb might be given in consultation with a PICU expert. Otherwise, we do not give bicarb at all. In the last 4 or 5 years, I have not given bicarb in any patient and all have recovered. How do we monitor these children? So like any case, hourly IO charting is very, very important to know how much polyuria is there, how much fluid is going, vitals, so heart rate, blood pressure, all of that. And hourly neurological assessment is very, very important in terms of sensorium, GCS, pupils, asking for headache, because that will tell you whether the child is going to go into cerebral edema or not. Hourly blood glucose level, this is very, very important to know how quickly your glucose is falling. Do you need to change the drip? Do you need to come down on the insulin? The guidelines say 1 to 2 hourly capillary ketones. It is not possible there. Even we don't do it in majority of the setup. So we just check with the capillary glucose every hourly and 6 to 8 hourly VBG and electrolytes. So we know that the child is recovering and doing well. So VBG, if the child is doing well, first initially we do at 6 hours. If the child is recovering well, we might make it 8 to 12 hourly also. Electrolytes, basically you're just looking at the corrected sodium for cerebral edema and potassium, because insulin is going to drop your potassium. So you don't want the potassium to drop even further. So we need to keep checking your sodium and potassium. Now,
sir, what should be the rate of drop of glucose?
So,
Blood sugar.
So I actually don't believe in this because sometimes the glucose can drop very rapidly. So if you are just following the fluid calculation that is there, then I think we should be okay. The rate of drop of glucose is not very, very important unless the child is developing certain neurological symptoms. So I don't think we should be wasting time on, कि इतना sugar गिर गया अपने को ये करना है. No, you cannot do anything there. So I think monitoring the other things will be much better than, thinking कि इतना glucose गिरा. See, for osmolality purposes, when you're talking of DI and all, then I do agree there it is important, sodium ke liye, but not for glucose. Glucose, I am not really this. I don't follow that. So more of neurological assessment.
No, we may come across hypoglycemia.
So hypoglycemia will not occur. That you don't worry. That's the reason you have to keep checking hourly glucose.
Right.
So if you're checking hourly glucose, as I said, if it is more than 250, we'll be giving 0.9 NS. If it starts dropping below 250, you shift to 5% DNS. What in our units where I go, we follow is if it drops below 180, we shift to 7.5% dip. If it goes below 100, we follow 10% dip. Otherwise, the child does not go into hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia will happen if at 250 below you are not changed from 0.9 NS to 0.9 DNS and containing the same rate of insulin, then hypoglycemia will occur. But if you're checking glucose every hour, the child should not go into hypoglycemia.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now coming to the concept of corrected sodium. So a lot of the units follow this corrected sodium concept. This is very important for monitoring of cerebral edema. So first of all, how do we calculate corrected sodium? So corrected sodium is nothing but measured sodium plus 2 into plasma glucose minus 100 divided by 100. So suppose if your glucose is 300 and your sodium is say 140. So your measured sodium, corrected sodium is going to be 140 plus 2 into 300 minus 100. So 200 divided by 102. So it is going to be plus 4. So it is going to be around 144. So I'll just repeat again. Suppose if your measured sodium is 140 and your plasma glucose is 300, then your corrected sodium is going to be 144 if you use this formula. So why do we do corrected sodium? Because this any child who is having hyperglycemia, you expect the child to be having some sort of hyponatremia. So any child, what happens when you start giving insulin? The blood sugar, the blood glucose levels will start dropping and the sodium levels should rise. If the sodium levels are not rising and if your corrected sodium is also following, then this is an indicator of cerebral edema and that is when you should decrease your fluid rate. This is just in cases where you see your sodium is dropping. So what we advise is if your normal measured sodium starts dropping and if your corrected sodium, when you do the calculation, that is also dropping, then that gives you an indication that this child might be going into cerebral edema. This is the time to come down on the fluids. Normally, if you stick to those calculations which I discussed above, not any child should go into DK. That is the reason the current guidelines give fluid at a very lower rate as compared to the earlier guidelines which used to give fluid at a very high rate. So this more or less we don't need to calculate in all children. Only in those conditions who are very sick, very severe DK is there, or if there is change in sensorium, then we start looking at the corrected sodium. So any drop in the corrected sodium. So if a child has a drop in the corrected sodium greater than 5, over the first 4 to 8 hours of treatment, that means the child is at the risk of developing cerebral edema. You need to come down on the fluid rate. That is the simple concept. Drop in the corrected sodium means you need to decrease the fluid rate because otherwise the child will develop cerebral edema. Now, when should we suspect edema? I think this is much important. Any onset of headache after beginning of treatment or progressively worsening headache, any change in the neurological status, irritability, confusion, inability to arouse, incontinence. In younger children, if they are not able to see all of this, if there are certain neurological signs like cranial nerve palsy, papilledema, Cushing's triad is a late but important sign, but we should note that. So any rising blood pressure, bradycardia, and respiratory depression, and decreased O2 saturation. So any change in the sensorium as such, then start suspecting cerebral edema. This usually takes place within the first 12 hours of treatment. It can even happen up to 48 hours, but the first critical time period is the first 12 hours. So how do we manage? Like any case of management, we either treat with hypertonic saline, so 3% hypertonic saline. we give a 2.5 to 5 ml per kg bolus over 10 to 15 minutes, or you can give mannitol 0.1 to 1 gram per kg over 10 to 15 minutes. This is all in discussion with the PICO expert. And fluids, we should come down to half maintenance rates. That's what the guidelines say. We come down to half maintenance rate fluids. And like any other thing, raised ICP management, so elevate the bed. If required, you might have to intubate the child. And you do all these once the child is stable, once the hypertonic saline is in, then only rush for a CT scan. Do not rush for a CT scan initially. Please start the management for cerebral edema. It rarely happens again with these calculations, but invariably, if the child is coming to you very late in severe decay, and once we start fluids, then the first 12 hours become critical. So if any of those signs are there, like headache is there, the child's sensorium is deteriorated. If it's a bad sensorium, I will yet advise wait for a couple of hours. If in a couple of hours there is no improvement in sensorium, then keep a low threshold for hypertonic saline. High threshold for intubation, low threshold for giving hypertonic saline. What happens once acidosis is resolved? So acidosis is resolved, we basically come to know either by checking your VBG or your bicarbonate. And in centers where beta hydroxybutyrate is available, if beta hydroxybutyrate is less than 1, we say that the acidosis is resolved. Please do not depend on urine ketones that I discussed earlier. Urine ketones take a longer time to get, negative or nil or trace. So urine ketones take a lot of time. Your decision has to be based on VBG, pH or beta hydroxybutyrate. Otherwise, go by clinical judgment in resource limited settings. So what we do is, suppose we've done a VBG, the VBG says that the acidosis is resolved. The timing is around 8:30 in the morning. I'm just giving an example. So what we do is we check the sugar at that time. After checking the sugar, I will be giving the subcutaneous insulin. After giving the subcutaneous insulin, after 30 minutes, we will ask the child to start eating. And once the child starts eating, I will stop the IV fluids, I will stop the IV insulin. So please give the subcutaneous insulin, and after half an hour, stop the IV fluids and the IV insulin. So again, just a basic part of management. What we do is basically in our units is we shift to the basal bolus regimen of therapy. We give is, as you can see in this photo, we give 3 boluses, which covers the 3 meals. So these are the short acting or the rapid acting analogs. And we give 1 analog which works over 24 hours. So the rapid acting analogs will roughly constitute around 50 to 60% of the total daily dose. So what we normally do is depending on the weight of the child, if it's a 20 kilo child, we will be taking the requirement of insulin anywhere between 1 to 1.5 unit per kg. But if I take say 24 units, if I want to now calculate how much I'm going to be giving my boluses, how much I'm going to be giving my long acting insulin. So if for 24 units of insulin, I'll be roughly giving around 40 to 50% of long acting. So I'll be giving around 10 units of long acting, and the remaining I will be giving a bolus insulin depending on the sugar. So we give a sliding scale. If the sugar is between 70 and 90, we fix a unit. If the sugar is between 90 and 180, we fix another unit. 180 to 70, the third unit, and more than 270, we form a scale like this. So depending on the sugars, we give the insulin. And this is how we shift the child to subcutaneous therapy. We observe the child for 3 to 4 days. As the child is doing well, we discharge the child. Now coming to, I think this is a very important slide, management of decay and resource limited settings. I think we should be doing this only if one-on-one nursing staff is available, because early monitoring is required in terms of vitals, in terms of glucose, in terms of IO charting and neurological assessment. So if these facilities are available, it is advisable. There is a good lab backup is there, because then you need frequent reporting of VBG or lights. Even if you can get a bicarb in a couple of hours, I think that is acceptable. That is not an issue. And you should be in contact, not in person. They don't need to come and see, but even on the phone, if you are in contact with an expert in decay management, they will be able to guide you. So some like a PICO expert or an endocrinologist. Please refer at the first go if it is severe decay. So if the child has very severe acidotic breathing, the sensorium is very, very depressed, if there is a depressed level of consciousness, or children less than 5 years, because these are the tricky cases. So if it is a severe decay, sensorium is depressed, or the child is less than 5 years, then please refer, because otherwise sometimes you might be doing more harm. If it is mild to moderate decay in an older child, or even severe decay in an older child, I think we should be able to manage in a resource limited setting. So the final 2 slides, what are our take-home messages? Decay is nothing but hyperglycemia plus acidosis plus ketonuria. If any one of these is absent, it is not DK. Depending on pH or bicarbonate, we classify the severity of DK. So if it is mild, the pH should be between 7.2 to 7.3. Bicarb should be 10 to 15. If it's moderate, pH should be between 7.1 to 7.2. Bicarb should be 5 to 10. If it is severe, the pH should be less than 7.1 and bicarb should be less than 5. In a non-shock DK, irrespective of the type of DK, so mild, moderate or severe DK who is not shocked, we will just give 10 ml per kg of bolus, which we will be subtracting in a later fluid calculation. In a shocked severe DK, you treat a shock, so you can give initially 20 ml per kg of bolus. This can go up to 40 ml per kg. This you will not be subtracting. Fluid requirement is nothing but deficit minus bolus plus maintenance. So deficit we will calculate depending on the severity of DK. If you have mild DK, take it as 5% deficit. Moderate DK, we take it as 7% deficit. Severe DK, we take it as 10% deficit. If it is a non-shocked, we minus the bolus. If it is shocked, we do not minus the bolus and we add the maintenance. We start insulin only 1 to 2 hours after the IV fluids. Please do not be in a rush to start the insulin. Do not give a bolus of insulin. For mild to moderate DK, 0.05 unit per kg per hour is more than enough. Sorry, again, there is a typo here. And 0.1 unit per kg per hour in severe DK. This is 0.1. This is not 1 unit per kg per hour. We will add potassium only after the child has passed urine or it is a documented normal potassium. Please do not give bicarbonate to any patient with DK. And excess fluid can lead to cerebral edema and mortality. So please, as far as possible, stick to the calculations. Thank you.
Nikhil, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes.
Whether in a infantile age or initial 1 to 2 or 3 year age, normal glucose level with diabetic ketosis is possible?
So guidelines do mention that one line ki you can have normal glucose with DK, but so far I have not seen, but yes, the text does mention it. So yeah, but that I would say maybe in a very young child, newborn, neonatal diabetes, that might be the case, but very, very unlikely. So far I have not seen.
Okay, and another thing, what is the causes of persistent acidosis while treating the patient? Just enumerate so that everybody can understand it.
So in
Why
India,
patient is not responding to our treatment?
so the main thing I think is improper calculations. So if your fluid therapy calculations are wrong, if your insulin calculations are wrong, IV being out, so therapy is not going. So these are the most common causes. If there is concomitant sepsis, I think that we need to rule out. So any sepsis, please give off an antibiotic because sepsis is going to take the time for the DK to settle. If there is some sort of renal failure there, then maybe it might take for the DK to take time to get, resolved. So I think the two most organic causes I can think of is sepsis and renal failure. I have not seen renal failure as such. I've heard my other colleagues talking. Sepsis we do commonly see, but invariably they do get out. Only one child in Gujarat, as I was doing when my first year residency, we lost that child. Otherwise, we've not lost any child with DK.
What about the hypochloremic or hyperchloremic acidosis, which can be persistent acidosis there, which is whether we should worry of that or not? If patient is improving.
Patient is improving, don't worry.
Right. I think the excellent presentation. Thanks, Nikhil, for on short notice you again just help us to carry over this Raigad IP academic activity.
Yes.
Again, in a wonderful way. You have just covered almost all the points in. I have gone through all the 25 pages of the guidelines that were given in last.
I have not covered a couple of points like phosphate depletion because it is not very commonly seen. All children with DK are going to have low phosphorus. So I don't think we need to document that. But in certain cases, you might have to give phosphorus. But again, that's for a different discussion. And I have not covered HHS because that is a very, very rare thing. I have not seen any. When I was speaking to Khadilkar sir, sir has also just seen one case. So that happens more in adults, doesn't happen more in pediatrics. DK is the most common thing. Yes. So the rest all I think I've tried to cover.
So where we do the mistake, it's to have a cerebral edema to the DK patient then.
Yes.
What are the common mistakes done by the general pediatrician?
First of all, I think if we don't diagnose it in time, so we just keep treating for other causes. So I think as you said at the beginning of the presentation, any child who comes to the OPD and you're going to admit, just get a glucose done, even a bedside HGT, just make it as a rule. That is not going to cost the patient as you money. So we do not waste time. Second thing, don't be in a hurry to give boluses, because what we do is we tend to give a lot of boluses. The more boluses you give, you tend to push the child into edema. So don't be in a hurry to give a bolus. Give bolus only if the child is shocked. Otherwise, wait and watch. And do not give a bolus of insulin, because seeing sugar, many times people get scared. They will give a bolus of insulin. So please start insulin a couple of hours after you start your fluids.
Even starting fluids itself reduces the acidosis and glucose level.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Sir, in subcutaneous insulin, does it mandatory to observe the potassium value?
Ideally, no, but when you're giving so frequently, so when I'm talking of you're giving hourly rapid, or if you're giving 4 hourly regular insulin, it would be better at least to document once a day. If you're giving like normal basal bolus regimen, when you're just giving thrice a day, then we don't monitor at all, not at all.
Nice.
Nikhil,
Yes, sir.
you said you didn't lose a single DK in last 5 years, and I'm sure that must be the experience with your teachers and forefathers.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If that is so, then why this guideline keep changing every 2 years?
That I have no idea, sir. So even I am fed up.
Last 5 years, there have been 5 changes. Last 5 years, there have been 3 or 4 major.
Yes, sir. So in
BSPD,
my
BSPD,
last
IPD, BSPD. Why they keep changing? Mortality is same or it is less than today in a standard PICU.
So
I have not lost a single DK in last.
Yes, sir. I totally agree.
About say 15, 20 every year.
I think this is all based on the trials that they do. So they had that pecan fluid trial. That's why they incorporated that into the ISPAD guidelines. So depending on the trials, and as you know, in every bureaucratic setup, you have to keep getting guidelines frequently. So in our country also, like vitamin D guidelines we got few years ago, we are again going to have the vitamin D guidelines.
No,
So I think it's
every
more of
new coming guideline is just a permutation combination of previous 2, 3.
yes.
Same permutation. There is nothing new. If you
No.
see, which you said, see where was their ideal first ISPAD.
Correct. Yes.
Then the altered maintenance fluid was the second BISPAD.
Yes, sir.
Then the ISPAD took the BISPAD, and now it's a combination of 3. I felt
Correct, sir.
by the jugglery.
That's the problem, sir.
I have another question. When you talk about the shock, when patient in the diabetic is in the shock, we talk about the fluid boluses, 20 ml per kg, then 10. Where we should start this inotropes to this patient? What is the guidelines properly? Whether we should go for above 40 or 40 ml per kg is the cutoff line where we start the inotropes, or
There are no guidelines as such. Invariably, if it is just plain DK, then they will not require inotropes. If there is concomitant sepsis or something, then you might require inotropes. So I think 40 ml per kg might be a safe point to start the inotropes.
मोहिते सर जास्त चांगलं सांगतील त्याच्यावरती PICU.
Intensive care. It's a shock is an intensive care subject. So forget the DK. If your patient of shock comes to you and you give the bolus, when do you start inotrop?
Right.
Because that time this patient comes in shock, your priority is to stabilize the shock, not
Right.
So there you give first bolus, the second you start to the things unless you are sure it is hypovolemic shock, and this patient is definitely not hypovolemic. There is no history for hypovolemia. So he is having something else. So maybe after another 20 and 10, I'll be starting inotrop. Meanwhile, I'll my sonographies and I'll functional and all.
Fluid overload. Right.
And their volume doesn't matter. You may push at 10. So we have pushed at 10, 78 ml.
Right.
Because that volume and shock is the priority about DK.
Right.
Where shock resuscitation is the priority, and DK you'll take in the second and third hour. You have to stabilize the shock within first 1 or 2 hours. So that's more.
Yeah. Thank you.
Nice talk, Dr. Nikhil. Very nice.
Thank you, sir.
This really cover almost all points.
Yeah.
मोहिते सर ग्रुप फॉर्म केलाय सायंटिफिक कमिटी बघितला असेल तुम्ही व्हॉट्सअप ग्रुप आणि उद्या मीटिंग आहे आपली ठेवतोय आपण.
Very practical aspects covered, huh? Dr. Nikhil, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming.
Start normal saline and start reading the guidelines and treat according to them.
And keep updating.
Keep updating. Shock or non-shock? Important. Patient shock मध्ये नाही.
No, the guidelines is like growth chart in Dr. Vaman Kadilkar's way. Which growth chart is not important? Use some growth chart. Similarly, which guidelines are not important? Use some guidelines.
The moral of the story is any child with DK should receive fluid and should receive insulin. If you receive insulin and fluid, the child is going to be okay.
Right.
And the fluid should not go over a certain limit. Otherwise, you're damaging the child. Otherwise, the child will get away with whatever you manage.
Main take home message, don't start insulin immediately.
Yes.
आराम से चालू करो बस 1 2 hour के बाद में फ्लूइड जाने तो फिर चालू करो. Patient not in shock, give 10 cc per kg, then you can start it with you later. Send the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because,
वानखेडे सर तुम्हाला बोलायचंय.
नाही, thank you.
वानखेडे सरांमुळेच ही झाली सेमी. त्यांनी करावं सांगितलं स्वतः गायब झाले. विसरून गेले.
गंगोलिया सर, बाबाडकर सर.
Thank you, madam. And thank you, sir. निखिल शाह सर, thank you.
निखिल, आपको हम बीच में तकलीफ देंगे यार, रायगढ़ वाले में ऐसे ही है.
हाँ सर,
चलो
और एक खाता
टॉपिक हो जाए.
After 6 months,
Nice presentation, and it was an excellent presentation. This was somewhat difficult topic, but you covered very well.
Yes.
Explained very well. We got good attendance also today.
Yes.
So
गंगोलिया सर, दाभडकर सर.
Excellent. As always, Nikhil is excellent.
yeah, new find.
No, he makes it sound so simpler and nice, So we feel like learning. Good. Dabadkar sir.
Any questions?
Abba? Okay.
Vote
So,
of thanks.
yes, if there are no more questions, then we'll go to vote of thanks. Where is my secretary? Where's Nilima? Okay, I will. Anyway, so Nilima, over to you for vote of thanks.
Dr. Nikhil sir, it was excellent presentation. It felt like as if from tomorrow onwards we are going to treat DK daily and getting the success. It was made so easy. It was wonderful presentation, and we like to learn in future also from you many things. So thank you, wholehearted thank you to you. Wankhede sir, thank you for suggesting the topic and pursuing it so that
6 महिन्यानंतर परत रिव्हिजिटिंग घ्या.
डॉक्टर वानखेडे सर फक्त सजेस्ट नका करू, फॉलोअप करा आणि ऑर्गनाइज करा.
ओके.
नाही, 6 महिन्यांनी ऑर्गनाइज केल्यावर मोहिते सर आणि निखिल शाह सर आपल्याला क्वेश्चन्स विचारतील 6 महिन्यापूर्वीच काय काय लक्षात ठेवलंय. रेडी
नाही त्यासाठी 6 महिन्याची गरज नाही, आपण 6 दिवसातच बसूया आपण.
6 दिवसात.
We should have done pre-test and post-test.
Yeah.
I got the call at 7 PM today morning from Raigad president. जय, आज का ऍक्टिव्हिटी का क्या है?
या सगळ्या आयडिया ज्यांच्या येतात त्यांच्यापासून सुरुवात करा. पहिली प्री-टेस्ट पोस्ट टेस्ट हेमंतला लाल सांगा. Start from there.